the artist determined the revolution. My job is to spot it. And I know the difference between an executive and an artist. It's the artists that create that, so that where the next revolution is will be up to the creative artist. My job is to spot it and to make that person feel very, very comfortable and supported along the way.
Clive Davis, the music empresario responsible for so many talents in the music industry, died today. He was 94. It's an interesting time to talk about the life of Clive Davis as the music industry undergoes so many changes because of the digital revolution. We talked of many things, including Clive Davis's philosophy of music, what makes a great talent, his famous parties, and the changes in the music industry.
Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
You were not steeped in music. You were not a young man that, from your earliest memories, listened to music, was encouraged to listen to music, loved music.
I listened to the popular program, the Maple Leaf Ballroom with Martin Block, and I was aware of the hits of the day, but I was not a music junkie. I was not a collector. It was not permeating my blood. I had no clue that music would become my passion.
And you were a lawyer, for God's sakes.
I was a lawyer to rise above the station of my parents, who died when I was a teenager.
Harvard Law School.
Harvard Law School.
Yeah. And so you got it in, and that's the legal end, and you made your way to be head of Columbia Records. And you showed this extraordinary talent. What was it, and how did you have it?
I never discovered how I had it. I just knew that the first time I saw Janis Joplin in the group, Big Brother and the Holding Company.
Was that the Monterey thing?
That's at the Monterey Pop Festival. Right. I had the job as head of the company for a year. I watched, I observed, but I knew when I saw her, I got a special feeling. If that word epiphany is to have any meaning, it changed the rest of my life. I signed her and the group, and then gradually built this track record, with Blood, Sweat, and Tears and Chicago, Santana, Springsteen, so that as it kept happening, I learned to trust that maybe through luck, happenstance, I had what they called a natural gift.
One of the other great figures in music in terms of an executive is Ahmet Ertegun.
Yes.
Did you have different skills than he had?
Well, we had different styles, but he was a great competitor. We were friends, but we competed with each other for records. I think that what we shared in common, as it turned out, music was the passion that dominated our lives. And I still well remember when you see Ahmet, me at one end of the Beverly Hills Hotel Cabana life, and him at the other end, him with Jagger and Clapton, and me with Sly and Santana, so that, but we shared that love of music that was very common to both.
So where do you put John Hammond?
John Hammond was an incredible A&R man.
Right.
He didn't run a company. He was not involved with marketing but he was someone who discovered Billie Holiday and Aretha Franklin and Bob Dylan.
But he had a lot to do with Springsteen too, did he?
He definitely did. He was the one that Springsteen and his manager went to see him because they wanted to know who discovered Bob Dylan. Yeah. And John Hammond went over his material, and I never forget him bringing Bruce into my office and going over the material and making the decision jointly to sign Bruce Springsteen.
Of all the people that you have worked with, who have you been closest to? The artist. Is Whitney always going to be sort of the one because you had such an influence because she was so young when you...
Well, when you discover a rock and roll artist, you're discovering someone who's self-contained. You're waiting for that artist, like Patti Smith, Springsteen. You're waiting for that artist. And it doesn't just have to be rock. It's true of Alicia Keys. You're waiting for them to write and develop their music. In the case of Barry Manilow, the first artist on Arista Records, which I founded, I then honed my ear to find great songs, either for artists who don't write, or like Barry, artists who did write hit songs, but maybe not enough to have the magnitude of his career 30, 40 years later. And so I was a creative partner of Barry. There's a separate chapter in my book for him and for Whitney and Aretha Franklin and Dionne Warwick, because I was their creative partner in coming up with songs that hopefully have stood the test of time.
Okay, but there's this too in this book, and some people have criticized you, but there's a number of instances in which you cite an artist and you make it clear that they did not listen to your advice, and it turned out not to be good for them.
Well, that is true. That's in connection with artists who want to write, but are not great writers. Yeah. And yet they have an incredible voice. I mean, the examples would be, for your audience, if they remember Melissa Manchester, who was able to write Midnight Blue, who wrote Come In From the Rain. And although I was to give her Don't Cry Out Loud and You Should Hear How They Talk About You, she did not want to be a female Barry Manilow, even though they were very close friends.
Or how about a female Barbra Streisand?
No, she didn't. She saw herself.
Barbara didn't write her stuff either.
No, she didn't. So to me, I have great respect for the songwriters who gave to Streisand, who gave to Sinatra. And indeed, with Whitney, after the first 2 albums, 7 #1 consecutive records, she came to me and she said, I'm getting hurt by critics who feel I should write, and they're not respecting what I'm doing as much as if I did write. Should I write? And my answer to her was, to me, if you can write, I'm thrilled to get those songs. It takes a big burden off of me. Exactly. But to me, you're in the tradition of Billie Holiday, of Ella Fitzgerald, of Sinatra, of Streisand, of Aretha. You've got a genius of a voice. If you could write a song like The Greatest Love of All or Saving All My Love for You, do it. But you have a tradition here that to me is incredible. And she never really raised that issue again, where artists, you can have a great voice, but if you don't have signature songs, if you don't break through with material, you have a career that stalls. And I give in the book examples of artists who many years later say, why didn't you give me shock therapy? Why did you let me say, I've got to write? Yeah,
but you're damn glad that Bruce Springsteen writes his own songs. And
you're
really glad
80% of
that
the
Bob Dylan writes his own songs.
80% of the artists that I have dealt with write their own material. Springsteen and Alicia and Patti Smith. Of course, they're geniuses in their writing.
Talk about, and I'm interested in this a lot, people who have magical voices, whether it's Whitney Houston or Barbra Streisand or Frank Sinatra, at various different levels of fan appreciation. What do they have, and where does it come from?
Listen, that's describing they have incredible natural gifts. Streisand, when you see her from that first show, I can get it for your wholesale. Right. When you hear her doing People, when you see, videos of her from the beginning, it's incredible. For me, I didn't discover by any means Aretha Franklin, but there are some artists that you say their career should not end with their era of great songs. It should go on for decades. So occasionally, whether it was Dionne Warwick or whether it was Aretha Franklin, I signed them because their genius is in their voice. Can you picture a great David hit and not picture and hear Dionne Warwick's voice?
But are they born with it, or is it simply that early on, Aretha was in the church and she was singing in the church early on?
I think most of it is natural. Most of it is a God-given born
and somebody
talent.
notices and encourages it, and the better you do, the more you want to do it, and the more you want to do it, the better you get.
I think that's very true. But so much is natural.
Has anybody had who's the most successful artist who didn't really have a good voice?
Who didn't really have a good voice? Well, certainly if you talk about a Bob Dylan, if you talk about when Patti Smith just began with that haunting poetry that she combined with rock music, it wasn't a question of them being great, but the combination, they were riveting. And ultimately, the public and we, to me, the two great poet laureates of America coming out of music are Bob Dylan and Bruce Springsteen.
Right.
When John Hammond and I signed Bruce, he wasn't the greatest rock and roll performer of all time. He shocked me a few years later in his career when he asked me to come to the bottom line. And all of a sudden, based on his own intuition, natural gift, he was jumping. He had before that stayed solitary. All of a sudden, he was jumping from table to table all over the bottom line. And he is, to me, the greatest rock and roll performer alive today.
Because if you go to his concert, you walk away believing he gave me every ounce he had.
Every ounce that he had.
Yeah. There's also this, though. People who are great artists, I tend to nourish their talent and tend to try to take care of it. Sinatra, for example. The legendary stories about how he would, swim underwater to just develop the power within his lungs.
But surprisingly, he smoked a lot.
I know, exactly.
This is from just observation, no career involvement.
Exactly right, yeah.
But surprisingly, he didn't, maybe he was not aware, and I think at the time, people didn't know the lethal impact of cigarettes.
But back to the voice thing, is it pitch? Am I looking for the wrong thing? It's just there. It's something like the bird sings.
Well,
you just hear it.
Obviously, a difference by the artist. For Aretha and Whitney, it was soul. For Aretha and Whitney, Aretha digs down. For me, what I do when I give speeches to college students, I'll play the demo of a song that came to me before I played it for Whitney. And then I'll play the finished record and show what she brought to that song and the difference between.
And what is it? Can you define it rather than hearing it? I'd love to hear it.
She found meaning in the songs, in the lyrics that I don't think the composers knew were there. When I first auditioned her, when I first saw her, and she was doing The Greatest Love of All in her act, she had two songs in the middle of Cissy Houston performance. And I knew the song well because I had commissioned it for the life of Muhammad Ali. I heard her do it. And even though we had a hit record with George Benson 8 years before, she was finding meaning in those lines about the children, about the greatest love of all, that I had never heard before. It motivated me to call the composer, Michael Masser, and say, fly into New York. You're not going to believe what you're going to hear.
What's your best decision and your worst decision?
Well, I thought my worst decision, if you have time for a parable, was when I passed on John Cougar Mellencamp, and a great rock and roll icon. But just a few years ago, at the rock and roll induction, Hall of Fame induction dinner for Jan Wenner of Rolling Stone, we were at Elaine's restaurant, and we sat down, and I was sitting, me here, Springsteen, Mellencamp, Don Henley, and Jackson Browne. And I was saying to John, this is so ironic in every interview when they say, who is the biggest artist you passed on? And I say, John, it was you because you were too close, ironically, to Bruce, who's sitting between us. He did say to me, Clive, I want you to rest easy. Let me tell you, 8 weeks before I auditioned for you, I was in a cover band. And then David Bowie's manager came to see me, said, leave that cover band. You got to start writing. And I left the cover band. I started writing. 8 weeks later, I'm auditioning for you. Who was the biggest influence on me at the time? It was Bruce Springsteen. So rest easy now when you tell this story, because I was very close to the guy that you and John Hammond signed from the beginning of his career.
There are 1,000 stories like this in this book. It's called The Soundtrack of My Life, Clive Davis.
Clive Davis is here for the past 30 years. His contribution to the music industry has been celebrated. At the age of 28, he entered the record business at Columbia and was credited with signing such legends as Bruce Springsteen, Janis Joplin, and Billy Joel. In 1975, he founded Arista, and for the past 25 years has been guiding the careers of such artists as Whitney Houston,
Patti Smith, and Barry Manilow. In addition to discovering new acts, he also broke new ground for established artists like Carlos Santana, Aretha Franklin, and Carly Simon. This past June, he left Arista at the height of his success and announced the launch of his new label, J Records. I'm pleased to have Clive Davis at this table.
Great to see you. Thank you for coming in. We got to know each other when I did the 60 Minutes piece with Carlos Santana.
Yes.
How big was that album, or is that album?
The album is about 24 million copies worldwide. So translated in dollar terms at the wholesale level worldwide, it's probably brought in about $260 million to the record company. And it will probably be, because it's selling still at the rate of about 125,000 worldwide copies a week, it will be in the top 5 of all time.
Of all time?
Of all time.
And who else is on that list?
Well, Michael Jackson's on that list. Bodyguard is on that list with Whitney Houston,
right.
I'm proud to say.
Yeah.
Elton John, Pink Floyd's. It's right up in that Fleetwood Mac territory.
What's the biggest selling group of all time? Is it the Beatles, or is it Rolling Stone, or is it Led Zeppelin, or is it the Eagles, or is it somebody I don't know?
I would say it's between the Eagles, really, and Fleetwood Mac.
Fleetwood Mac.
As far as big best-selling albums.
The number of albums and sheer number of albums out there.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah. You signed Springsteen?
Yes.
You signed Billy Joel?
Yes.
Did you know Springsteen would have the impact he had? I mean,
Absolutely
did you know
not.
that this was somebody, of all the shows I have done, my interview with him gets as much feedback as anything.
Yes.
He has a connection to an audience out there that like nobody I know.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, when I signed, John Hammond brought me Springsteen.
The great John Hammond.
And the great John Hammond. And I listened to his music. In those days, if you were a folk singer, you were really always compared to Bob Dylan. But here was someone who had come along with a distinctive different sound, with style, with a different language, with different imagery. The Greetings from Asbury Park album, the songs, whether it be Blinded by the Light or others that stand for that classic album. No, there was no way of knowing that he would become, really, to me, the best live rock and roll performer of all time.
The best solo artist.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, the E Street Band was behind him, but it,
yes. Well, I'm saying, but as far as individual live performer with a connection to an audience, he was not that way when I signed him. He was stationary. He played Max's Kansas City. He played other small clubs. And I candidly, one day we were doing a show. I had taken over the Amundsen Theater in Los Angeles to say that rock is not dying. And I was mixing and matching Miles Davis and the Mahavishnu Orchestra and Bruce Springsteen and Johnny Mathis to show the vitality of contemporary music, because it's always under attack, that it's ephemeral and it will die out. And I remember being on this huge stage with him. And I said, you really have to work the stage. You have that ability. But he didn't at the time have that. But 2 years later, he invited me to the Bottom Line. I had just started Arista, and I brought Lou Reed with me. I was totally unprepared for the whirling dervish that he was, jumping on tables, just being so charismatic, so electrifying.
And then stopping and having these soulful conversations with the audience.
Yeah, but meaningful and from the heart conversations. No, when you sign an artist, when I signed Whitney Houston, I felt that she was, for the next generation, a combination of Lena Horne and Aretha Franklin. But you never know. I mean, you just, how much that album was going to sell. When I just re-signed Carlos Santana, you do it from instinct. You see, obviously, in his case, the incredible talent. But to tap into 24 million copies, or you don't know that, no.
To your credit, because I know something about this, because of Carlos, nobody wanted him. He couldn't get a record deal. And you immediately saw something that he could do and teamed him up with Dave Matthews and others and put that album together. But if ever there was a clear case where someone saw a new stage for an artist, it was you in that case.
Yes, but not knowing
It
how
wasn't
to
automatic.
excel.
Nobody else wanted it.
No. These things are never automatic.
No, if it were, everybody could do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
what is it you hear, though? I mean, what is it you think you have? You have an instinct what the public wants. You have an instinct for what's new. You have an instinct for sound. What?
It really depends on the category of music. As far as a songwriter is concerned, if you're gauging what a hit song is, it's knowing what a hit song is. It's being able to factor in instinctively the lyric, because the lyric is important in most cases, except maybe a dance record, with the melody, and see how accessible. When you see a Broadway show, whether there's a song you hum when you come out of it as compared to an integrated score. If it's a unique artist, if it's Patti Smith, if it's Bruce Springsteen, you just feel that the artist is plunging into your soul and affecting your mind. And so therefore, you're looking for uniqueness, you're looking for star charisma, you're looking for a variety of things that, to me, not being trained in it, became natural. And now, I feel it. It sounds like a cliche, but I feel it in my spine when I'm in the presence of somebody who's special.
And I tell you what else it is the value of experience, because things build on top of each other. I mean, you've been there before.
Well, it's true, but that doesn't account for the first 10,
of course not.
So that I think that a lot of it is really sensing someone special. What I look for, I try to name J records star records, because what I've always said is you look for a star, you look for a headliner, you look for someone who has a long-term career and who can mesmerize audiences, and take them out of their chair. Whatever it be, vocal prowess, lyrical prowess, instrumental prowess, you're looking for those people that excel uniquely.
You left Columbia, not pleasant circumstances. Did you have any doubt that you could go on and start a new company and make it?
I had no doubt that I would stay in music. I approach life not expecting anything, in the sense that very much within my arsenal of approach to life is the idea of knowing that you got to work hard for anything. So that for me, my parents died when I was in my teens. I had no money, went through school on scholarship. So just getting into Harvard Law School by scholarship, just getting into the record business by luck and good fortune. It's all taken hard work, so that when I started a company from scratch, I didn't assume that I could do it. I knew that I loved music. I knew when I was head of Columbia that I went to clubs and I went to small little rehearsal halls or basements, and I signed artists from my own ears. I was not outspending anybody else. And of course, the circumstances turned out terrific. Life is who moves the cheese and how you take that and how you then can be resilient. And so it was indeed Columbia Records who helped finance Arista Records, because a year or two later, they gave me a check for $1 million for the mail order rights to my new company and gave me the Martel Foundation Award for my humanitarianism. So that it's a matter, life does not stay the same ever. And it's a question of how you respond to challenges. And I find that I don't expect anything. If something adverse takes place, you rise above it and you do what you do best.
Then how did you face the leaving of Arista, which was your baby? I mean, Columbia was there before you were there, but Arista was your baby.
Absolutely. Still is my baby. You don't not have a baby when you have built this legacy. And the 25-year at Arista was a wonderful experience, and I certainly wish it well. For me, I would not have planned any kind of new venture. But again, when your contract comes to an end, and I must say this about Bertelsmann and BMG, they always believed and wanted in me and wanted to be in business with me. So that although they had certain policies or different decisions that I might have disagreed with, they were not that fundamental that I would never be in business with them. And when they said to me from day one that they would finance the largest record company ever launched in the history of the business, 4 times larger than any company that's ever begun, that they would give me essentially my same senior management team and A&R staff to start the company with, that they would give me platinum artists and gold artists and my first 3, 4, or 5 top draft choices so that I'd have momentum. To me, that was not only affirming as far as what I have done and what I can do, but presented an opportunity that I couldn't get at Arista, and that was to own 50% of the company.
Fair enough. Everybody loves a lot of equity. But, I mean, you had that year, though, which you couldn't have had a better year last year. I mean, not only did Carlos Santana create one of the 5 biggest albums, as you just said, of all time, but you were honored and entered into the Hall of Fame, and I happened to be there that night at the pre-Grammy dinner where all these people were standing up singing Stevie Wonder and Whitney Houston and Carlos Santana and all these people. Yet at the same time, at one point, didn't they come to you and say, we want another person to run Arista Records?
They said to me that they had a different succession plan as far as my being over 60, they're looking to the future, my feeling at the top of my powers. But they didn't just say that. That would be unfair to them. They said, but we want to be in business with you as your partner. And if you want to start the largest new company in the history of the business, we'll put in excess of $150 million in cash.
Are they doing that?
Yes.
$150 million?
That's right.
So they put in a lot of cash and you get half the company? Is that the deal we're looking at?
Well, plus I got my senior management team, plus I got some wonderful young platinum and gold artists and my top draft picks. And so we start, look, every 3 years, Charlie, I had to reinvent Arista. 11 years ago, we were never in country music. And then Alan Jackson came and Brooks and Dunn came. We were not into street R&B. So we formed LaFace, and I did that with LA and Babyface. We went into Bad Boy Records because we didn't have the street and the rap. To the extent that I had to reinvent the company and the new artists there, whether it be Young Dido, whether it be LFO or Next or Deborah Cox or Monica, or whether it be Santana and That Great Story, or working with my partner, Whitney Houston, to keep reinventing Whitney and for her career to soar. My point is, from a businessman's point of view, I always had an equity in Arista.
Right.
If it became worth $2.5 to $3 billion and it became complicated to give me a continuing equity, the same company offered me 50% of an instant major. We just signed Luther Vandross. I just did a label deal with Wyclef.
You mean for Jay?
Yeah.
So you got Luther. Who else do you have? You got Luther Vandross. You've got Wyclef.
Wyclef's label, yes.
His label. Who else?
Well, we have a joint venture with Arista for Monica, the triple platinum young Monica. We have platinum artists, Deborah Cox and Next and LFO. We've got the young 15-year-old guitar sensation Shannon Kerfman, and the new talents, which one day I'll take you up on your invitation to bring my new discoveries to you. Jimmy Cozier, Alicia Keys, the stars of tomorrow that I was working with for a year and a half.
Here is also what they think in the music business, that when Mariah Carey's deal ends, you're gonna talk her into coming over to Jay. And all these stars like Whitney and Mariah and people like that, who you've had a relationship with in some cases. Whitney, it's like, I don't know what it's like, father, son, brother, sister, whatever it is. What is it? Whitney.
We are creatively bonded.
You said partner.
Yeah, so we've been partners.
But I mean, to listen to her talk about you, so she's going to come to Jay, right?
Listen, I have never been in the banking business, so that for me, I've discovered artists from scratch. I've never had to tap into that. Yeah. For me, I will work with artists if it's mutually beneficial, and so that. First of all, I'm going to continue producing Whitney for Arista. I'm going to continue producing Carlos Santana.
You are?
Of course, our relationships are.
So you will produce the albums that they record for other.
Of course, our relationships go on. It's the best. This is a win-win situation. Okay. It's the best situation for me, and I relish it. Frankly,
How big a talent is Whitney Houston?
Whitney Houston is an incredible talent. Putting Aretha Franklin to one side, because she is the national treasure of life, Whitney Houston is the best singer in the world today. If you ask any musician, if you ask Babyface, if you ask David Foster, if you ask Quincy Jones,
Right.
the absolute best singer in the world today is Whitney Houston.
What is
without
it she
question.
has?
She has a combination of soul and fire and lyric depth and stunning beauty, an ability to caress a ballad and soar with it, an ability to take the stage and have people dancing all over the world. It's very unique. And although she doesn't get, only recently, I mean, someone like a Robert Hilburn in Los Angeles reviewed her last concert, and he was so amazed by her talent that he said, you know, this, I think I'm reviewing the artist formerly known as Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston is electrifying.
I'm going to come back to Whitney Houston. Who's on the male side? Who's the male Whitney Houston who you could say the same things that you just said?
Well, I think I just signed the best R&B male singer in the world is Luther Vandross. And I think that the opportunity of working with Luther, whereby he'll take half the album the way I did with Carlos, and I'll get the other half of the album to come up with the best material, the best producer associations, because, you know, I was going to say pound for pound, but his weight does fluctuate, although he's certainly great.
That's right.
He's looking great now. Yeah. But I think the best male singer really in the world is Luther Vandross.
Really?
Yes, I do.
Whitney Houston. We all read these stories. Did she require an intervention because her friends were so concerned about her?
I know of no such intervention that
you don't know anything about
place. No, sir.
Yeah. If you love someone like you've got to like this woman, you've got to worry when you see all these stories. And you got to say, if there's smoke, there's fire, that this is a talent like I've never seen before. Is it true? Should I be doing something?
Whitney Houston, from observing the professional responsibilities that I have had with her, and I'm only the guardian of her professional responsibilities, has given back from the day I discovered her when she was 19 years old. If I have a pre-Grammy party, she comes every year and knocks everybody out. If there's a 25th anniversary party for Arista, only the second time any company was ever given that in history, every major artist was there, and yes, they said her heel got caught, so there was that big hoopla. Was she on top of her game? There was nobody left in their seats. They were standing and cheering. She followed Santana and Annie Lennox, the wonderful Annie Lennox, and Sarah McLachlan and Patti Smith and Puffy. And when she was on, she soared. So she's only given back to me. And our latest album...
All of that is so obvious to anybody. My question is, are you concerned about Whitney Houston?
I'm concerned about all of the press about Whitney Houston. I know nothing about her personal life. I know that she feels that she's happily married. I know nothing about her personal life.
You don't know whether she uses drugs or not?
I do not know.
But you've got to worry and be concerned if...
I'm concerned about the press and the stories, especially when you see a concert and you see someone's heel get caught. They say that she was stumbling around the stage, and here there were 6,000 people in the audience who saw her fly off the stage and take the audience out of its seat. So this is not a matter of whitewash or anything of that nature. I don't ever get into the personal lives of the artist. I'm their guardian of their professional responsibility. On a personal level, one-to-one with me, she's got a heart as big as they come. She has been always there for me, and her performances in a professional capacity have been historic. So I'm giving you back what I know.
Okay, but if you knew that they were true, would you feel an obligation to do something?
Yes.
You would?
Yes.
Okay. Where is music going now? Hip-hop? Who can we look at and say, maybe it's some of the people you just said, and it's in your nature to say, the people that I've recognized, I've signed, and that's where I think the future is, because that's what you do. But give us a sense of where music is heading in your judgment.
Well, you can't predict revolutions. The most current revolution is the hip-hop revolution. You know, I lived and my career got jump-started by the rock revolution. Right. And so it led to all the early signings, and that's why I got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. But to the extent that there is now a merging of whether it be rap and heavy metal, whether it be a merger of the spoken word and the rhyming in conjunction with the rock, so that young artists, yes, you find Eminem and Limp Bizkit, and you see the rock artists and Red Hot Chili Peppers, and they're performing together and they're going out together. And there's no question that there has been a ferment of excitement caused by the hip-hop revolution, a lot of which has clearly dismayed the elders in society, and that's happened, you know, when Bob Dylan came along. So that the artist determined the revolution. My job is to spot it, and I know the difference between an executive and an artist. It's the artists that create that, so that where the next revolution is will be up to the creative artist. My job is to spot it and to make that person feel very, very comfortable and supported along the way.
Much success with Jay.
Thank you so much.
Clearly, your track record suggests that you will do well.
Thank you very much.
Clive Davis, thank you for joining us. See you next time.
Join me, become a subscriber to Charlie Rose Global Conversations, and make it a better experience. Click this link to subscribe.